right? And this ability to generate its own impulse is because of specialized myocytes. What do? They will depolarize spontaneously, as we will discuss in the action potential, at a rate of about 60 to 100 beats per minute. Spontaneous depolarization. You don't need a stimulus for depolarization. Okay, that is called automaticity. And rhythmicity is ability to initiate rather a regular rhythm. You see, the heart to heart variations are very regular. The heartbeat keeps following the other heartbeats, right? That's why it's called as a regular rhythm. Usually we have got disorders in which the rhythm might change and it becomes irregular, and we need to conduct the impulses, right, from the area where it is impulses are generated to the areas where till the whole cardiac muscle is covered. We need to conduct, because if electrical impulse do not reach particular area, that area cannot contract. So it is the excitation contraction coupling which is important. So if a particular area like a small muscle myocardial area is not receiving impulses, they will not be able to contract, and that becomes a problem, because like in conditions like atrial fibrillation, or in condition where there is an ectopic or area where there is a dead tissue, it cannot reach, so it cannot contract the surrounding areas, and then we get contractility problems, right? So there might be electrical activity happening, SA node might be firing, but the muscle is not receiving, so it cannot contract. It's as if the heart is not able to pump the blood. Contractility is another property. This is especially property of the cardiac muscle cells, right? So the cardiac muscle, if we divide the cardiac cells, we have got the excitatory cells, right, and the conducting pathways which are non-contractile, and then we have got the atria and the ventricle which actually contracts. Now this is what I was telling to you about. We have got the SA node which generates impulses, called as the pacemaker of the heart, and it generates impulses. Where it is located, SA node?
Right atrium.
It is located, yes, it's located in the right atrium, at the junction of right atrium and superior vena cava. One second, please. So we have to let them in. They are in. Okay, so if we look at this, it's at the junction of the right atrium and superior vena cava, and it contains these specialized cells. So the electrical impulse from the SA node, if you see on the right side, right, from this SA node, if you see the impulses will actually keep on traveling now from both the atria, from the right side to the left side, until it eventually will reach the AV node. All right, it will reach the AV node. What is the speciality of the AV node? Mhm.
Yeah,
There
exactly.
is
As
there
Abdullah
is
mentioned earlier.
okay. There is AV nodal
It's
delay.
a slow wave.
Exactly. What is the advantage of that delay? Have you heard of the AV nodal delay? See, the AV node is located in this postero-inferior part of the coronary sinus. Give time to filling. Yeah, Abdullah Maulem says that. Yes, it actually delays the AV node delays conduction from atria to ventricle. Yes, Moat, you are correct. There is a 100 millisecond delay to allow the time for the atria to depolarize and fully empty their contents into the ventricle. Before the ventricle starts to contract, it should receive all the blood. So AV node delay allows atria to depolarize fully, so that blood, all the blood it has, it's pushed down to the ventricles, and the ventricle before contraction receive all the blood. Okay, so after a small delay in the AV node, we have got the electrical impulses spreading to the ventricular conducting system. It goes to the ventricular system, okay, which contains specialized myocytes below the AV node to the walls of both the ventricles. We have got the bundle of His, right? Bundle of His dividing into the right and left bundle branches, and it goes along this interventricular septum, right? Remember, the left bundle branch will split. What does it split into? Anatomy.
Purkinje?
It splits into left anterior, left posterior fascicles. Okay. So the bundle branches and the fascicles will terminate now into specialized fibers called as Purkinje fibers. Where are the Purkinje fibers? In the walls of both the ventricles. And they will electrical impulse when passed through these Purkinje fibers allow the complete depolarization of the ventricles followed by complete ventricular contraction. Okay, and these are the different impulse rates. As you see, this is what is called hierarchy of pacemakers, right? We have got sinoatrial node which is firing at the maximum rate, atrioventricular node at slightly lesser 40 to 60 impulses per minute, and Purkinje fiber. When will this become important? These two.
When the sinoatrial node is not working?
Exactly. When the SA node, for some reason, it's not working, then the other pacemaker take over, right? But as you can see, SA node was beating at 60 to 100 impulses per minute. The other cells will not be able to beat at such a faster rate. That's why we get bradycardia in these cases. Okay. Now this is what we are aware of. We already know this. Now the electrical signal that can regularly contract the atria and the ventricles, right? It has got two cells, right? The cardiac, the atria and the ventricle. What are those cells? One is the conducting cells and is the contracting cells. The conducting cells are the nodal cells, specialized conducting cells, right? The SA node, AV node, bundle of his, bundle branches, Purkinje fibers. All these are the specialized conducting pathways. Now they have this very important ability to spontaneously generate action potentials. These action potentials will travel along this pathway and cause depolarization of the entire thing. Now, the interesting thing about this node pathway is the presence of what are called the along the pathway. They stimulate contractile myocytes via gap junctions, electrical gap junctions. Okay, this will allow contraction and generation of good. The cardiac muscle, the atria behaves like a syncytium, means one together complete whole muscle fiber. This atria and this will behave like a one muscle fiber because the muscle fibers are connected with the gap junctions to each other. So once this muscle fiber is actually getting excited, immediately through this electrical window called as gap junction, the other one will also excite at the same time. This will also excite at the same time and sorry, contract at the same time, the atria. So all this muscle contracting at the same time means atria will pump blood into the ventricle exactly together, and at the same time the right ventricle is receiving the blood from the entire atria and left ventricle receiving from the entire ventricle. Okay, so this is the sequence of pathway which you already know. Speed of conduction is sometimes important. Why? Because whenever the speed of conduction is changed, the arrhythmia start to develop. Okay, look at the speed of conduction. Atrial muscles about 0.5 meters per second, whereas the AV node, as I told you, is very less, 0.05 meters per second. Very good. Faster conduction, the fastest conduction. What is a route where the conduction is the fastest? Mhm. Any idea?
Can you repeat the question, doctor?
Where is this electrical impulse conduction the fastest?
Purkinje fiber.
Exactly. Look at the Purkinje fibers. 4 meters per second. They have got the fastest rate of conduction. So this is just a thing you have to remember. Just try to remember the fastest and the slowest, especially the fastest is in the Purkinje fibers. Okay. The Purkinje fiber, they are going to stimulate the contractile myocytes, atria and the ventricle. And when they fire, the entire atria and the ventricle will fire, especially the ventricles, because ventricles are responsible for pumping the blood into the circulation, right? And that gives it an important role when it comes to the pumping action. So entire ventricle, thanks to the Purkinje fiber. There are diseases in which Purkinje fibers will be damaged. Do you know any such disease or problem where Purkinje fibers are damaged? See, this can be damaged, especially whenever there is a myocardial infarction. Okay, so there is a damage to that area. It can produce what? The heart will be unable to pump because the contractile force will be lost. So how actually can we check if this electrical activity is happening is previously we used to do what is the experiments. Even in physiology we have done such experiments in which we check out the frog's heart or a bigger animal's heart. Okay, and then we put an electrode. For example, we can actually take out this, right? We put an electrode over here, and we put an electrode over here, and there are also single cell electrodes. When we use these electrodes, we can actually connect this to a galvanometer, and we can get these recordings in different stages. Okay, depending upon the tissue we are trying to excite, we can either get this called as a pacemaker potential or cardiac muscle potential. So depending upon the tissue we are keeping the electrodes, we get both of this, right? So you know about the resting membrane potential. What is the resting membrane potential of cardiac muscle? It is negative. How
Negative
much?
90.
Negative 90, right? So it ranges from
Negative 80.
minus, yeah, it's minus 70 to minus 90. It's considered as resting membrane potential of these cells. Okay, cardiac myocytes, neurons, skeletal muscle, all these will range in this value, usually around minus 80 to minus 90 millivolts. Okay, now if we talk about these, and then in the clinical practice, we are doing the ECG as you have done in the first year. In the ECG, what happens is action potentials are converted to electrical signals, right? Why? Because whatever is happening in the heart, this movement, this electricity is now being transported to the skin, because we have got electrolytes in the blood which are good conductors, ions, right? So they will transport whatever is happening in the heart to the surface which is covering the heart, which is nothing but the skin. So we can place the electrode on this surface of the skin, and whatever recordings we get, we will amplify it, because these are millivolts, very very small. So we amplify and we get it on the electrocardiogram as an ECG, and you know the waves of the ECG. I'll come back to that again. So this is what we can do. See, we can take a single muscle cell. If this is a cardiac muscle cell, we can excite it. It's a muscle cell in a petri dish. Okay, we use special ions in over here to keep this medium, which is rich in nutrients, to keep it alive, and then we connect this to an electrode and record. So different recordings are achieved from different areas. For example, here we are getting cardiac muscle action potential. Okay, then we can also get it from different areas, a smaller amplitude, probably from the AV node. All right, and we can also have a multi-channel in, we can use multiple cells and record their action potential. So multiple ways of these are there, but to remember, we actually connect it to something called as cathode ray oscilloscope, nothing to worry about. But we can use electrode method, in which we place an electrode and record it. The action potentials are recorded. Two important action potentials are received: the cardiac action potentials, right? The heart cells will produce two types of action potentials. One is called as a fast response action potential, FRAP, fast response. One is a slow response action potential. And as you know, the fast response is seen in the normal ordinary cardiac muscle, whereas a specialized cardiac muscle, which are the pacemaker, produces a slow response action potential. Now we talk about the fast response action potential. Can you just somebody recall what's happening in the phase 0 of cardiac muscle action potential?
He did depolarization.
Yes, depolarization. Somebody mentioned sodium influx. You're right. Rapid upstroke and depolarization, a phase where voltage gated sodium channels open, right? Okay. What about phase 1?
The plateau.
Plateau called.
Then what is phase 2?
Mm.
Starting of depolarization.
Good. Initial repolarization. You are correct, right? So at this point, sodium channels were activated, so depolarization happened. And when they reach close to 0, right, slightly overshooting to the positive, sodium channels will become inactive. When sodium channels become inactive, sodium entry will be stopped. So entry was causing depolarization. Entry stopped, a repolarization starts. Okay, at this point also we have got potassium channels. Voltage gated potassium channels will open, especially they will go out. When sodium was coming in, electron neutrality was changed. Lot of positive ions inside, so potassium as a positive ion will leave to maintain electron neutrality, right? So when potassium ion leaves, sodium entry is stopped. We get phase 1 called as initial repolarization. Then comes a very important phase, important for clinically, especially for the drugs, called as phase 2. What is this phase? Yes, there is calcium influx. You're right. What is this phase called? As you mentioned, it is the plateau phase. It is a plateau phase. Through what type of channels calcium will enter? You can type, you can use chat box also. No worries. We have got long lasting. Yes, these are, but long lasting L type of calcium channels. Okay, L type of. So where is calcium? Calcium is entering or calcium is leaving? Entering, right? Why? Potassium was going out. Now calcium will enter to again maintain electron neutrality, because this has stopped. Potassium is going, calcium starts to enter. So this will balance. Going out, coming in is balanced. We get a plateau phase. We get a plateau phase. Okay. Now here it's very important to remember calcium influx is triggered by something called as calcium release of intracellular calcium from sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay. Remember, calcium influx is actually happening. This calcium influx, what is happening? This will now trigger contraction. How it will trigger contraction? Because a lot of calcium coming will actually go and activate the sarcoplasmic reticulum calcium channels. And there is a lot of store of calcium in the sarcoplasmic reticulum that will now come out. A lot of calcium is actually here in the inside the cell, cardiac muscle cell, that does not come out unless calcium induced calcium current happens. So this outside calcium comes inside. This calcium now actually go and activate specific ryanodine receptors on the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Sarcoplasmic reticulum release calcium, and from the excitation contraction coupling, you know that this calcium will cause contraction. Okay. Then comes phase 3. What's happening in phase 3 now? Exactly. You're right, Mohammed. It is repolarization, right? Here again, what happens is these potassium channels were equal to calcium channels. Now more potassium channels will open. Okay. These are called as transient outward potassium channels, but later on we get a lot more ion gated potassium channels, which will open. Massive potassium channels goes, potassium comes out, efflux through the voltage gated slow channels, they are called as well as these calcium channels will close. This calcium channel will close. There is inactivation. As a result, potassium outgoing out will be more. So nothing is coming in, lot of potassium going out, repolarization happens. And then we have got phase 4, which is resting membrane potential. Okay, resting membrane potential. Now compare this with the pacemaker potential. Can somebody tell me what is the mechanism for the phase 0 of pacemaker potential? Calcium influx, you said not sodium. You are correct. You see here phase 0 was a rapid upstroke. Here it is a slow upstroke. Here responsible was sodium. Sodium always causes a rapid opening, rapid depolarization. But calcium is not as sodium. So it will cause a slow depolarization thanks to T types of calcium channels. T types of calcium channels. Okay. Now here what's happening is in this at this point the sodium channels are inactivated. Sodium channels are inactivated at this point in the pacemaker cells because they have got a less negative resting membrane potential. Here the resting membrane potential was -70 to -90. Here the resting membrane potential here was -70, let us say. So sodium channels get activated this, but at a even more negative -30 or even -60, in this range, sodium channels are inactive. Calcium channels become active. And these calcium channels, when they go, they cause this depolarization. Okay. In the AV node, especially, this will cause a slow depolarization with prolonged activity. But remember, the ion channels are responsible. Okay. What about phase 1 here? Which ion responsible for phase 1 in the pacemakers?
I don't think there's a phase 1.
Yeah, there is no phase 1. There is no phase 2. So there is no initial repolarization, there is no plateau phase. What about phase 3?
Starting with polarization.
Exactly,
Potassium
repolarization
efflux.
phase. Excellent. Potassium efflux, and whatever was active, sodium, calcium channels, here become inactive now. Sodium, calcium entry stops, so slowly this will start to come down. Potassium starts to gain more and more exit, and then it becomes repolarization. The interesting phase is this phase here, phase 4. What is happening over here? Can somebody tell me?
Sodium influx.
Excellent. What
Sodium leakage
influx?
channels.
Sodium leaky
Leakage.
channels, you are right. These are called funny channels. Why they are called funny channels?
They leak sodium all the time.
You know why it is funny? Sodium channels are activated during this depolarization phase. When the sodium channels are activated during repolarization, they are behaving funnily. They are behaving opposite to their nature, right? So this is called as, yes, sodium used to be fast. These are slow. Their depolarization will happen. Membrane potential at this point will spontaneously depolarize. Why? Sodium conductance will increase through these funny channels. So instead of going down, right, complete depolarization going to minus 60, minus 70, suddenly they stop and next phase depolarization starts. But again, for this to happen, during this phase, funny sodium channels will open, and they are the one responsible for sodium, for the automaticity. The automaticity which we say is mainly because of funny currents or funny channels. Okay, so these are, what kind of channels are these? These are sodium channels. They are funny because they should be activated during depolarization. Here they are activated during repolarization. Okay, so funny channels are funny. They are not acting like fast sodium channels activated by depolarization. Rather, these are activated during what is called hyperpolarization. Okay, hyperpolarization is where they are activated towards this. Okay, so this is the speciality of this pacemaker potential. These are also called as pre-potentials, diastolic depolarization. Names are given for this. Okay, and then they will continue. These both are under the influences of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Remember, this is automaticity. They can generate its own impulse. But can we increase heart rate? Can you give me any example in which we can increase heart rate?
Sports.
Yes, sports, try to run and you increase heart rate. How about decreasing heart rate?
Yoga.
Yeah, yoga, meditation, even sleep, the heart rate decreases. This is due to the influence of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So these are automatically they are firing, but we can influence them through the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. So what are the tissues in which you will see fast response action potential?
Walls of the ventricle.
Yes. Atria, ventricles, the bundle of his, Purkinje fibers, all show fast response action potentials. Okay. Slow response, of course, atria, sorry, the SA node and the AV node are the prime examples for this. Okay. Again, this is just a depiction. This is how I was showing you. We record during when we use electrodes to connect to the cells, like neuronal cells. Like there are some animals like Aplysia. Aplysia is a small animal, it's an organism which has got a large neuronal cell. If it's a large neuronal cell, we can actually place the electrode much better. So we can do these tests and we get these kind of phases. So this is just a recap from the last slide. You should know each phase. You should know the ion responsible for each phase. Why? Because we have got drugs where we can use, for example, calcium. We can block calcium. Let us say there is too much contractility in the heart, right? We want to block this phase. We can give a calcium blocker. Okay? Or if there is a arrhythmia producing because of sodium, we can give a sodium channel blocker. So when you know the different ions and the phases responsible, you will be able to understand the pharmacology much better. Okay, this is just a recap. So whatever is happening over here is beautifully given in these diagrams. Please try to read it. Please try to know what the names of the phases. the channels which are opening and closing, okay, and the types of channels also, and what's happening, which is the depolarization, which is the plateau, which is the repolarization. All this what we discussed, notes is given. Please try to remember this. Transient repolarization is due to transient outward potassium channels, okay. And then we have got different kind of channels called as slow potassium channels, which will produce the repolarization in the last phase. Okay, so this is just a small test for you, but I think this is easy. Rapid phase is 0. Phase 1, transient potassium channels, influx of these calcium channels are closing. But as I told you, there are two types of channels. One is called as a transient potassium channels. Another is called as a delayed rectifier potassium channels. Okay. Now, transient potassium channels are responsible for this phase. They do not have too much of activity, but they close off over here. But at the end of this, we get specialized potassium channels called as delayed rectifier potassium ion channels, which actually produces rapid repolarization. Okay, just another name over there. And of course, we have got the closure of these channels are happening, and then we get a membrane potential is getting stable, and then we call it as a resting membrane potential, where the cell might even go for hyperpolarization, but usually it comes for depolarization and goes ahead. Okay. Now there are two more things over here which you will study in case 4 called as delayed after depolarizations. After depolarizations. Okay. So inshallah you will cover that in your coming up this one. So after depolarization phase, right, they are going to get some more activity which is called as after depolarization. Have you heard of this after depolarization? Right. So usually what happens is this phase is a repolarization phase, right? In some conditions, after this, there is a small amount of depolarizing current which is seen. Okay. After this repolarization is complete, but before another action potential starts, some depolarization activity happens. In the absence, for example, see this is a cell, this is another cell, SA node fire, and here depolarization happened. This will now reach here. It will contract. It will contract. Right. What can happen if between the two beats this has to take a rest, right? After this repolarization is ending, immediately the cell, before a new conduction happens, because of some abnormality within the cell, small amount of depolarization happens. Now when this happens, this will start to contract again. But there is all or none phenomenon. It can contract fully or it cannot contract. But instead of a new signal sending electrical activity, here we get a transient increase in the membrane potential called as after depolarization. These are of two types, early and delayed. Why this is important is, if this is happening, there is a impulse. Without an impulse, there is an excitatory activity. These are responsible for what is producing called as arrhythmias. Okay, so inshallah when you study arrhythmia, you will have to come to these two things called as early and delayed after depolarization, in which there is abnormality of repolarization. Repolarization, by the time it is completing, it does not completely repolarize. A small amount of depolarization happens, and this can produce an abnormal generation of impulse, and this produces what we call as the problem of arrhythmias. Okay, the problem of arrhythmias. So we'll come back to that later. Again, just showing you, this is just a notes for you to remember, so I don't want to refer to that. Funny channel, this is what I was telling you. Funny channels are funny because unlike fast acting voltage gated channels, they are activated, which are activated by depolarization. Funnily, they are activated by hyperpolarization, and they are responsible for the pacemaker potential. Okay, these are the two ones. Important thing to remember is the ion responsible for phase 0 in the upstroke. Here in the fast response seen in the cardiac muscle, it is the sodium channel, as you mentioned. In the slow response, it is the slow current, and it is the calcium current responsible for this. Okay, so a quiz for you. What do you think? Length of the action potential. Where do you find, what can you give an example? How long is the action potential in the SA node? SA node, relatively, if you see, if you compare, it is the fastest. You see, the fast action potential is 100. SA node is very close to this. SA node action potential is still, the length of the action potential is 150 milliseconds, whereas in the AV node and the ventricles, there is a longer action potential, the slower action potential. What about the conduction velocity? You don't have to memorize this. You don't have to memorize, just get an idea that as we move down, and here look at this, the conduction velocity is much more faster. That's why it's called as fast action potential. Tissues involved, you're already aware of this, SA node and AV node, whereas the tissues here are the atria, ventricles, bundle of His, and the Purkinje fibers. And phase 0 over here in the slow is the calcium, here it is the sodium, whereas here is the phase is the increased potassium, etc. Remember this, we have discussed this, remember this. Targeting antiarrhythmics. If we want to target the slow response action potential, we will go with beta blockers. Especially beta blockers will block the sodium channels. Increased sodium was responsible for this. Let us say there is a condition of arrhythmia. The heart is producing not 70 beats per minute, 200 beats per minute. Now, the 200 beats per minute generation of impulses is not the heart rate. It's not the contractility. It is excitation. It is actually having a lot of increased activity of slow response action potential. So you will get a much faster heart rate. Sometimes heart rate up to 100, 120 exercise is okay. But because of the abnormality, arrhythmia, if you get a very high heart rate, the patient will not be able to actually produce action potential, cannot produce all contractility. Or before the relaxation of the heart, there is a new excitation coming. We want to reduce that. We want to block the impulses. We can give a class 2 beta blocker. Or sometimes we can give a calcium channel blocker, which will affect this phase. So these two phases can be interrupted. By interrupting this phase, we can reduce the impulse generation by these tissues. So if the SA node is generating 200 beats per minute, it's going to cause problems because the contractility of the heart, all or none phenomenon, it cannot contract again. But once contraction is incomplete, another signal comes. This will produce problem for the heart. The electrical activity is getting disturbed, because of which the next time when the heart tries to contract, maybe it is in a refractory period. So this produces a problem. We want to reduce the heart rate. We can give either this phase, calcium channel blocker, right? Or we can block the sodium channel blocker. These are the two commonly used drugs as antiarrhythmics. Okay. Whereas here, we can block all these phases. We have got class 1A, B, C blockers, which are responsible for the phase 0, which are called as sodium channel blockers. Okay. And class 3. Okay. Class 3, which is the phase 3 potassium channel blockers. So sodium and potassium channel blockers are very well used for both these kinds of tissues. If the arrhythmia is because a ventricular defect, ventricular muscle defect producing some arrhythmias, we can use this. But most often we use calcium channel blockers and beta blockers because the most of the conduction defects are due to the excitatory pacemaker tissues. Okay, so depending upon the tissues, we are going to get these things. And remember, both of these tissues are under the influence of sympathetic nervous system. So if you increase acetylcholine, you will decrease the heart rate because it is parasympathetic nervous system. If you give catecholamines like sympathetic nervous system, caffeine, cocaine, they will actually increase the heart rate. They will increase the heart rate. So they are under the influence of these two. Now, just a little bit about the contractility part, right? Contractility part, you're already aware of the contraction, right? So can somebody tell me about contraction? Excitation, contraction, coupling. What is initiating? This is actually overlapping with these two, right? What initiates is as soon as the action potential comes, action potential is the one initiating from the SA node. It is actually going to come and it is acts on the cells, generates action potential, converts to tension, right? Tension and shortening of the cells. Now, excitation, contraction, coupling, if you see over here, there is a difference between skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle. Can you tell me the difference? The plateau, very good. Calcium is a very interesting thing. This plateau phase, lot of calcium entering, as I told you, calcium which enters now, cardiac myocytes will use the calcium which is coming into it during the action potential phase. Okay, so during the phase 2, the L type of calcium channels will open and calcium will come. This calcium will actually go and activate what is called, and these are called as the calcium currents. This will go into the cell and activate sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, so calcium is responsible for inducing calcium. Now this calcium, whatever we have, is actually coming from what is called sarcoplasmic reticulum. But sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is storing this calcium, will not release calcium for contraction to happen unless it is activated by calcium. So calcium, which is coming into the cell during action potential, will actually go and activate, this is the cell, activate sarcoplasmic reticulum. Calcium induced calcium release. This is called CICR. Calcium induced calcium release. There is another protein over here called as phospholambda, which is, this is called SERCA, sarcoplasmic endoplasmic reticulum calcium. So this channel will open only when there is a disinhibition of phospholamban. Phospholamban is a protein which goes and sits there. It does not allow this channel to open. When calcium comes in from outside, this is not happening in skeletal muscle. Remember, ECF calcium cannot enter directly into the cardiac muscle. There is no such channel responsible which can allow into the skeletal muscle. Whereas in cardiac muscle, ECF calcium can enter through the ryanodine receptor, go to this sarcoplasmic reticulum, SERCA. SERCA is a channel over here which can open up the calcium. It is inhibited by phospholamban naturally. When calcium comes in, it will remove this inhibition. Phospholamban will be disinhibited so that calcium can be released. Okay. Also, phospholamban is responsible for entry of calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So once this calcium is released, it goes and binding of this calcium happens, and you know the entire process, right? Then there is a sarcomere shortening, etc. So contraction happens. The interesting thing over here is entry of calcium the action potential is carried through the T tubules and they enter into the membrane, and then they go carried over. So this is how it is different from the skeletal muscle. And then after this calcium is utilized, it goes back. This relaxation happens as a result of extracellular calcium which entered, which produced this release. Now once the action potential is stopped, this calcium cannot enter, right? Action potential is stopped from outside. No more calcium entry, no more signaling. As soon as this signaling stops, calcium exit stops, calcium will come back to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And this coming back will actually produce myocardial relaxation. Okay, so extracellular calcium enters the myocardium, calcium induced calcium released, okay, from extracellular calcium to intracellular calcium release, myocardial contraction. And finally, once the outside calcium stops, myocardial sarcoplasmic reticulum will stop and you get relaxation. So the influx of extracellular calcium is very, very important. Okay, so we have got T tubules are very important over. T tubules carry the action potential to the cells. Why is it important? Is because if extracellular calcium changes, if we get a hypercalcemia, right, this calcium, if it is too much, it can cause cardiac muscle contraction and produce a state of heart block. Cardiac muscle will stop in systole and diastole depending upon the ion. So calcium, too much calcium is there, too much calcium is entering, relaxation does not happen, heart can stop. So extracellular calcium, no problem with skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle will not have any problem. That is why we need to maintain a normal level of calcium, potassium and sodium in the body. Whenever there is hypercalcemia, hypocalcemia, hyperkalemia, there is a problem with rhythm disorders. So they can produce rhythm disorders of the heart. They can produce arrest, cardiac arrest, either in systole or in diastole. So that is the problem why we have to maintain a good level of ions in the blood, not because of problem with the skeletal muscle, but the cardiac muscle contractility, excitation and contractility depends upon normal level of ECF ions. If ECF potassium is more, calcium is more, they can affect the cellular cycling, especially the ECF level of calcium and also sodium. Okay, sodium also can produce a lot of arrhythmias. So whenever you are studying arrhythmias, you will know ionic disturbances are because of sodium and calcium, and also sometimes because potassium is responsible for repolarization. If there is a potassium blockade, like hypokalemia, what happens is the heart will not be able to relax and produces cardiac arrest. Okay, and the rest of the cycle is very clear. You know, the troponin, tropomyosin. We have got this calcium which is coming to come and bind to the troponin C. There is a change in the structure. It moves tropomyosin, actin binds with myosin, and then we get this power stroke, which is responsible for movement. And there is a sarcomere which is going to this all needs ATP, right? The myosin, when it is binding, it requires a high energy myosin head which has got ATP, then binds to actin, sliding filament theory, and there is a contractility which is happening. Okay, so this is about cardiac muscle excitation. There's a small video which is there. You can watch this video, I think. Sorry, this is not working. Anyway, I'll give you the link. You can just watch about this cardiac muscle excitation to contraction, etc. Now, why do we study action potentials? Essentially, to study arrhythmias. You see, normal rhythm of the heart, if the heart is working at this rhythm, fine, we are very much happy. But if any change in the rhythm of the heart, any change in the action potential, any change from the beats from 70 to, let us say, 150, will produce some problem. These are called as arrhythmias. Arrhythmias. The patient here, when the excitation is too much, contractility is not efficient. We are not able to pump out enough amount of blood, so the patient might get lightheaded, shortness of breath, tiredness. These are all symptoms of arrhythmias. There is a case 3 which discusses arrhythmias in much more detail. The patient might also experience a palpitation. He might start to feel his or her heart beating. They might, especially if you're anxious, if you ran and you do sports, you can feel your heart. But normally at rest, if you are feeling palpitation, it's abnormal. They might be sweaty because of the autonomic symptoms. They might even produce angina. Why angina? Angina is always produced when the oxygen supply and the oxygen demand are not balanced. Okay, when the oxygen supply and the oxygen demand are not balanced, whenever we get angina. For example, in the patients you studied today, in the first patient, because of coronary artery stenosis, what the patient has got, whenever the patient is walking, supply is actually not, demand is increasing, but because of the narrowing atherosclerosis, supply is not able to match, they get angina. Okay, the same thing happens whenever oxygen supply is not meeting the demand, is not meeting the supply is not sufficient, especially because of atherosclerosis, you get angina. So in these patients also, angina happens mainly because when the heart rate becomes too high, the cardiac contractility cannot match up and they can produce angina. There are other mechanisms also of angina. Inshallah, you will study in case 2, 3, and 3.4. So have a look at this. We are going to get abnormalities. For example, we can get a premature contraction. Why premature contraction? Because this is normal beat. Sometimes the ventricle is getting premature because too many action potentials came from the SA node and the AV node. When they come too much from the AV node, sometimes the ventricle, even in between normal beats, it is about to rest. At the end of resting, suddenly we might get an electrical potential for which this contraction will happen. Okay, so premature ventricular contractions might be there, or there might be ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation. These are the different x-rays. Inshallah, you will study in the case 3. We will give you a good training, and also clinician will come and talk to you about ECGs, and these kind of rhythm disorders can be produced. That is why it's important to study action potential and the ions responsible and the ECG waves they will be producing. And of course, we have got different class of drugs which we'll be able to use. For example, class 1 is called as sodium channel blockers. Sodium channel blockers. Class 2 is beta blockers. You should know these class of drugs, names of these, examples, mechanism of action. Here always you should know about mechanism of action of these drugs. How do sodium channel blockers work? Which channel will they work? Uses. Under what conditions are we going to use this? This you will use for pharmacological knowledge, okay, not in physiology. But reading this action potential and the phases will help you understand. We are using potassium channel blockers to block the third phase of the action potential, and calcium channel blockers are also called as class 4 anti-arrhythmic drugs. Okay, so please read pharmacology when the time comes. Recording of ECG is very important, right? ECG we did study last year, and you know a lot about the ECG. And ECG, as you know, is the electrical recording from the surface of the heart. These electrical potentials which are transported across by the electrolytes, the sodium, potassium, and the electrolytes which are present, which gives through, we record it using electrodes which are present. The ECG lead, we use a 12 lead ECG. You studied this last time. We have got lead 1 to 6 limb leads, then we have got the chest lead, sorry, V1 to V6, and we have got L1 to L3 limb leads, and AVL, AVF, and AVR are the other 3 limb leads. So we get 12 lead ECG. Usually we studied one lead 2, let us say lead 2, we study in detail to get rhythm of the heart rate and rhythm, and then we also study other ECG waves, okay, to study the rhythm, the heart rate. We're talking about the intervals, the PR interval, the PQ interval, and the QRS complex, and also the electrical axis of the heart, as we discussed in year 1, right? Then here we may have to go through the abnormalities of the ECG, okay? Different kinds of, don't worry about this, this is not with us, but abnormalities of the ECG. For example, we may have a P wave abnormalities, QRS complex abnormalities, bundle branch blocks. Especially interesting will be the ST changes, okay? I think we have got this. This is just to showing you a recorded ECG strip. This is the lead 2. We study long ECG lead. This is all we study with the heart rate. We will discuss, Dr. Owen will discuss, inshallah, the how to calculate the heart rate. You already know how to calculate the rhythm. Interesting thing will be for we talk about ECG is the acute coronary syndrome, because ECG will produce the changes called as ST segment changes. Okay, either ST segment depression, ST segment elevation. For example, we get a ST segment elevation MI, right? STEMI we call, or we have got a NSTEMI, non-ST elevation MI. Okay, and what's happening is whenever there is a MI, there is a ischemia, right? Ischemia means what? Less blood supply. Less blood supply means what? Less energy coming. Less energy coming means especially the sodium potassium ATPase, which is a very important pump in all cells of the body. This potassium pump will be inhibited. Okay, inhibition of this sodium potassium pump happens. Now this is responsible for giving a lot of energy to the cell, and it needs a lot of energy to bring back sodium ion outside and to bring back potassium ions into the cell. 3:2 ratio, right? Sodium to potassium. To do this, it requires a lot of ATP. So the cardiac cell is working. It's working. It's depolarizing, repolarizing. Sodium ions are going in and out. Potassium ions. We need to reverse them. To reverse them, we need ATP. ATP comes from blood. If the blood has got ischemia, less blood supply, less ATP, sodium potassium ATPase pump will not be able to work. If this pump is not able to work, the myocytes will start to slowly undergo. Less energy is supplied. Less energy means what? Patient will start to get fatigue very early. Walking, he starts to get angina pain. Why? The cardiac muscle says, we want to work, we are not getting ATP. This is because of the reduced blood supply. This leads to what is called as ischemia and infarction. Inshallah, you will study in the upcoming cases. This is just again showing you the waves of the ECG. You already know this. We know about the P wave responsible for the atrial depolarization. QRS complex is what denotes the ventricular depolarization and repolarization by the ST segment, especially the T wave. Now, important is to remember, these are the events not correlating with contraction. Contraction is following this. When atria depolarize, followed by atrial contraction. Okay, atria contracts only when it is depolarized. Ventricular depolarization is followed by ventricular contraction, right? And then ventricular repolarization means ventricles will start to relax. Those are the phases of the cardiac cycle. So what is the importance of this studying cardiac action potential? Essentially, we study cardiac action potential to study the phases of the action potential responsible for studying of arrhythmias. And also, when the heart muscle does not contract properly, we start to get what is called as heart failure. Okay, so these are the two important things why we will study. Now, the structure of the cardiac muscle, just in brief, if I may recall what you have already studied. Cardiac muscle is actually very interesting, is because of the interconnectedness through the gap junctions. Okay, these gap junctions will make atria work together. This is interconnected with the help of what is called as intercalated discs. Intercalated disc, if you see the cardiac muscle histology, these stripes areas are seen. These are called intercalated discs, which are actually connecting neighboring cardiac muscle cells with the help of what is called as gap junctions. present in the intercalated disc. These gap junctions are electrically low voltage. So whatever action potential comes immediately get transported to the next cell, conducted to the next cell, and they are able to transmit action potentials across the atria. So atria will contract together. When they pump the blood into the ventricle, atria will not misbehave. They all atrial muscle cells will contract together and release it. Okay. And if you see the cardiac muscle cell, we have got a lot of mitochondria. Why so much of energy is required? Especially there is an enzyme called as quick coenzyme Q, right? This is very much important for the production of ATP. As you see, as the heart becomes older, coenzyme Q levels, COQ levels starts to fall, and they are present in the mitochondria. They are not able to produce much energy. That is why old people will start to get easily fatigued. You are already knowing about the muscle contraction due to actin and myosin, intercalated disc which connect the cardiac muscle cell. Interesting fact about this is the T tubules. T tubules are responsible for bringing the action potential into the deeper areas of the cardiac muscle, right? Inside the cardiac muscle, T tubule. These T tubules are not having a similar function in the skeletal muscle. And another interesting thing is the calcium storage, which happens in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and calcium induced calcium currents, which happens. The rest of the things you can just refresh if you are interested, not so much important. But what is important for us is the calcium currents, because they are the target of the drugs. And if it does not happen, we get a weak heart, weakness of the heart, and we get a cardiac failure. Well, this is what I was just explaining to you. It's just a quick recap. Calcium is entering over here. Look at this. It enters through the T tubule, and once it enters through the T tubule, this calcium will go and attach to a channel over here. Okay, this will sense, hey, outside calcium has come in. Good. Lot of sarcoplasmic reticulum will release this calcium. This calcium is called as calcium sparks. Okay, this is called as calcium induced calcium currents, calcium release, calcium induced calcium release. This release is called as calcium sparks, and they are the ones responsible for contractility, because calcium, when it goes, it produces this actin myosin to be binding. But later on, you see what's happening. When this calcium coming into it will be finished, as soon as this signal goes away, calcium induced calcium release will stop, calcium spark will stop, calcium will be detached, and they will go back through two ways. One is a sodium calcium exchanger, NCX. Another way is the sarcoplasmic, the SERCA protein, SERCA, which is over here, guarded by phospholamban. Phospholamban is keeping is inhibited. Once this signal stops, it detaches and calcium can enter back into sarcoplasmic reticulum. So the calcium stores are restored back. Okay. So some calcium this calcium came in, right, from this. This has to go away. It came in and it is there. This calcium is over here. A lot of calcium inside the cell. Whatever is calcium taken by the sarcoplasmic reticulum goes back to the calcium stores. But there is some calcium which came from outside through the NCX, sodium calcium exchanger. It goes away. Okay. There are drugs which actually will block, and there is also sodium potassium ATPase. Why? Because whatever sodium came in exchange of calcium going out needs to be going back. That will be again with the help of sodium potassium ATPase pump. So this pump is bringing back the polarity back to normal. It uses a lot of ATP. Digitalis is a drug which will block this sodium potassium ATPase. So what does it do? What do you think what happens if we block the sodium potassium ATPase? Any example? Digoxin. Yes, digoxin. If I give digoxin, it blocks sodium potassium ATPase. So what can happen? Decrease ATP demand. Okay, no problem. What about the ions? What happens to the ions?
Sodium acid.
Excellent. See, what's happening over here is sodium is taken out because of this ion. If this is blocked, sodium remains inside. If sodium is remaining inside, calcium is not going outside. Calcium remaining here, calcium will actually produce more contraction. A lot of calcium, instead of being removed, it remains over here. You produce contraction. So in a weak heart, in a weak failing heart, if I give this, I am essentially doing what? I am increasing the contractile ability of this. and I can make the heart work harder for some more period of time. Okay, and as a result of that, we are able to get a stronger heart. So a patient came to you with heart failure. One of the drug which is used nowadays, we have got a lot more drugs. One of the drug which is used is this kind of drug. It will block sodium potassium ATPase, allowing the calcium to remain for higher periods of time, as a result of which we are going to get more calcium, more contraction, and these things happen. So there is some notes for you, how this keeps on binding, how it changes, how it calcium is removed. So please go through these notes, because this will help you understand this process. And also the other things like this, you're already knowing of this. I've just discussed with you the how the myosin head is attached. ATP, it requires what is called as ATP, and converted to ADP, energy is required. And finally, there is binding, there is sliding filament theory, detachment happens, and then calcium is going to go back. Okay, so this is just to refresh you. Please just go through these things, because these questions are commonly asked in examination, progress test, the activity of these cells, right? How myocardial relaxation happens, how they produce the contractility and relaxation is known to you. Okay, so these are just notes for you to continue to study. Now, the important fact to remember, a couple of things, is inward calcium currents. Okay, if we are able to increase the amount of calcium which is going to come in, right, what we are able to do, we are able to increase the plateau. And if we are able to increase the plateau phase, we are increasing the intracellular calcium. So just like an example here is sodium potassium, the pump blocker like Digitalis, we have other drugs which can actually enhance the plateau phase. Okay, enhance the plateau phase. By doing that, we increase what is called ionotropicity. What is ionotropicity? It is the contractility of the heart, very much useful in cardiac, in heart failure, right? So the amount of intracellular calcium, if we can increase, proportionally we can increase the contractility of the heart, which is something which is used, which is called as a positive inotropic effect. Positive inotropic means this drug, let us say they say, oh, this drug is a positive inotropic. What does it mean? It is increasing the myocardial contractility. Sometimes we might decrease the myocardial contractility. Can you give me an example? Sometimes we want to decrease myocardial contractility.
Tachycardia.
Tachycardia. Okay, tachycardia might be one. Sometimes what happens is the heart is weak. Okay, the heart is weak, it is unable to pump enough, but it is trying. It is trying. Sometimes you want to reduce the what you talked about. Tachycardia is the heart rate. You want to reduce here the contractility of the heart. Sometimes because in the heart it becomes very weak, it is unable to contract. It is unable to contract. But we are giving a drug. We are giving a drug which increases the myocardial contractility. Okay, why you want to increase myocardial contractility? Maybe the patient has got not a cardiac condition, but let us say the condition like shock. The patient has got a shock. He is having, let us say, peripheral vasodilatation. There is hypoxia. Blood is not able to reach. The heart is trying its best. But in such a patient, if the patient has got a weak heart, we would not want to put too much pressure on the heart. We would write actually to give a fluid to the patient. At the same time, we will try to decrease contractility in some of the shock conditions. So don't worry about this. Our important will be in heart failure, how we are actually increasing the heart rate. Why we want to increase the cardiac contractility is mainly because we want to increase the cardiac output. This is our main thing, right? What is cardiac output? What is the definition? Cardiac output. What is stroke volume versus cardiac output? Hmm. So cardiac output is the amount of blood which is ejected by the ventricles every minute, right? So we have got stroke volume. You multiply this with heart rate, you get cardiac output. You get cardiac output, right? In blood pressure regulation, if you see, blood pressure is a product of what? Blood pressure is equal to cardiac output into what? Blood pressure is cardiac output into TPR, you're right, total peripheral resistance. Total peripheral resistance. So when you're studying blood pressure, cardiac output becomes an important determining factor. And cardiac output in turn depends upon stroke volume and heart rate. And stroke volume in turn depends upon other things. Like for example, stroke volume depends upon two things as mentioned over here. Blood volume, which is the preload of the heart, right? Preload of the heart, and vascular resistance, which is the afterload, right? So if I want heart to pump enough amount of blood, I have to make sure that it is getting enough blood to pump the preload of the heart, right? The volume of the blood in the veins coming back to the heart should be good enough. Venous return should be good enough, right? And the heart to pump the blood, vascular resistance should not be too high. After load, means the load when the heart is starting to pump, you should not encounter high resistance. And that depends upon the ventricular pumping. Is the ventricle good muscle? Is it hypertrophied? If it is hypertrophied, it is unable to pump blood. Is there a blood pressure high in the patient? Hypertensive patient, vessels are narrow, the heart has to pump high against high resistance, high vascular resistance, cardiac output will go down. So these are how cardiac output will be measured. And it is very much under the influence of sympathetic nervous system. Why sympathetic nervous system? Sympathetic nervous system can change the tone of the vessels, right? It can change arteriolar tone and venous tone. If sympathetic nervous system is good enough, veins have a good tone. They can return good amount of blood back to the heart. So these nerves can actually change the preload. Parasympathetic nervous system does the opposite. Hormones can also affect the heart, especially hormones. There are hormones which can affect onto the heart, like thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone can increase the amount of catecholamine, sympathetic nervous system receptors on the heart, and increase the heart rate. That is why hypothyroidism patient, low thyroid hormone, will have a bradycardia and they will have a less cardiac output. Whereas a hyperthyroid patient will have a too much thyroid, too much heart rate, tachycardia, hyperdynamic circulation, even functional murmurs can be heard. Okay, so your knowledge when you're applying here, you'll have to extrapolate and come up. This is the cardiac output. If you see these factors, as I was telling you, sympathetic and parasympathetic system can affect the heart rate. Heart rate and stroke volume you multiply, you are going to get cardiac output. So if the patient is not having enough cardiac output, like the two patients we had, right? One patient was a heart failure patient, heart myocardial ischemia patient. Even the other patient is having pain in the legs. We call intermittent claudication. The third patient today you discussed, they are again cardiac output is there out, but it is vessels peripherally are narrow because of which produces pain. So this heart rate, adequate heart rate 70 to 100 beats per minute is needed for the cardiac output to be normal. Now I can increase this heart rate by sympathetic nervous system through the activation of beta adrenergic receptors which work through cyclic AMP. What does cyclic AMP do? It causes a lot of calcium to enter into the cardiac muscle. And as you know, more calcium means more contractility. More contractility means more output. We are able to pump out a lot more blood. So subhanallah, this is how sympathetic nervous system will work. Whereas parasympathetic will activate what is called as the muscarinic receptors, M receptors. These muscarinic receptors are actually inhibition of calcium entry. So we have got vagus, right? Vagal. Now we have got a vagal tone. Essentially, if you disconnect the nerves to the heart will beat at 100 beats per minute. The SA node will beat at 100 beats per minute, called as the intrinsic heart rate. Okay, because of the input of vagal will bring down the cardiac tone to 70 beats per minute. So our heart is beating at 70 beats per minute thanks to parasympathetic nervous system. Now whenever we want to exercise, our brain will fire sympathetic nerves. Sympathetic nerves will come over here, attached to beta receptor on the heart. They will increase cyclic AMP, increase calcium contractility, right? And this increased calcium entry, not contractility, calcium entry will produce us more plateau. More plateau phase will actually produce more contractility. So we are able to increase the cardiac output through increasing the heart rate. And now we are able to get more stroke volume or cardiac output, which can go to our exercising muscles. Whereas on the other side, parasympathetic system, rest and digest, you are relaxed, sitting in the chair, not actively doing anything or thinking too much. you are just doing relaxing activity, sleep, etc. Parasympathetic will try to reduce your heart rate and all, so that activity of the blood reduce the cardiac output reduces slightly, but still be in the normal value. Now, another factor is stroke volume, means the heart ability to pump itself. That depends upon the output, depends upon the input. Did the heart receive enough venous return? Yes, a good amount of blood volume, if it receives within physiological limits, more blood entering into the ventricle, ventricle will keep on stretching, stretching, stretching. The initial length of the muscle fiber decides the force of contraction. That is of Frank-Starling's law. So the atria is receiving good amount of blood, it sends good amount of blood, good AV nodal delay, good amount of ventricles relax, receive the amount of blood, they continue to stretch, and the initial length of the muscle fiber will be increased and increased. And the higher the initial length, means the more filling, more the length, more force of contraction. So the force of contraction depends upon the initial length of the muscle fiber, Frank-Starling's law. Good, we received good amount of blood coming into the heart, we are able to pump good amount of blood outside of the heart, blood volume is good, cardiac output is good. But at the same time, if we have got resistance, resistance means when the heart pump the blood, blood is going out, but the vessels are saying, hey, we were good in diameter, now because of atherosclerosis or the problem with the aorta, it is becoming small aorta, like aortic stenosis, we are unable to take up whatever blood you are giving. So the heart says, I am experiencing resistance to outflow, increased peripheral vascular resistance, right? And I am unable to send all amount of blood, so the cardiac output is now becoming reduced. There are compensatory mechanisms the heart will undergo. For example, hypertrophy, it will try to become bigger so that it can pump out more, etc. But this will become abnormality. But if the blood vessels are compliant, right, the Wind-Kessel effect, they're able to distend very well. As soon as they receive blood, oh, they distend very well, like in 20-year-old people like you. 70-year-old person, old person, distension of the vessel wall is not sufficient. They will not be able to open up that easily. That is why they will tell, oh, I cannot walk so long, I will get tired, I do not have exercise capacity like before. Why? Because of the arteriosclerosis, increased vascular resistance, that will decrease the cardiac output. They will not be able to exercise or work like before, because of they are unable to go through the oxygen demand supply is not being matched over here. Okay, apart from that, just showing you, this is the Frank-Starling mechanism. See, within physiological limits, this is a physiological limit. Within the physiological limits, what's happening over here? The tension and sarcomere length. The more length of the muscle fiber increases, right, the tension generated increases. Look at this. This is optimal. Perfect. The figure B, where the actin and myosin, as you can see over here, when the sarcomere length is small, the ends are too close to each other, the actin filament and the myosin filament. So this myosin filament, to bind to actin filament, to bind to this, it's not finding enough space. But as the tension increases to optimal value, where the Frank-Starling's mechanism is at optimal, the actin filaments are so far separate, the myosin can come and bind perfectly. Imagine the heart is becoming is a small heart. It's a small heart. This is a normal heart. Or the heart become big, dilated heart. In dilated heart is such a way that the actin and myosin are the actin two filaments are very far from each other, so that the myosin head cannot come and bind. Right? These are the three showing you the sarcomere length. The length of the sarcomere, only if it receives enough amount, if it receives less venous return, it is like this. Less venous return, it does not open up fully. So here, less sarcomere length, less atria sending less blood to the ventricle. Ventricle says, hey, to contract, I need sufficient blood, but you are giving me insufficient blood. I cannot pump out 70 ml. You are just giving me 50 ml, right? I cannot pump out 70. So here it reduces the output. Whereas if you are able to send enough amount of venous return to the atrium, good amount coming to the ventricle, good amount of ventricle is now stretching, good blood came in, good sarcomere length, ideal Frank-Starling's mechanism, right? But again, if you are sending too much blood, or if the ventricular wall is dilated, abnormal, it can happen It can happen when the ventricle is actually pumping too much blood. It can undergo hypertrophy, and in the condition called as dilated cardiomyopathy, the chamber becomes too big. If it becomes too big, this length is too long. Length is too long, the actin and myosin cannot join together because the actin filament are too far apart from each other. No proper joining. The same dilated heart cannot function, cannot contract like before. Okay, so this is just a few things about Frank-Stahl's relationship. Now, if we talk about the vessels, you remember we have got different organizationally as you are studying in this today's case. The vessels are arranged very differently, right? So this is the aorta, which is giving rise to the large arteries and small arteries and the arterioles. These are mainly distribution wise, right? They want to distribute blood to the small areas of the body, but these are again the site of resistance. So arterioles are the main site of resistance. If I am saying, hey, the resistance increase, blood pressure is high, it is the arteriolar resistance which can be changed by many of the drugs. If this resistance is increased, blood cannot flow easily because there is resistance. Whatever blood is coming, it will be blocked. If I want to dilate arterioles, I am able to send enough blood to the peripheries, to the capillaries where the exchange happens, and then to the capacitance vessels where it comes back. Okay, so if you see the blood flow, it will be connected to these two things. The flow is being affected by two forces. One is the current and the electric current, which is given by this equation, electromotive force by resistance, and the flow. Whatever is flow of ions, flow of water, flow of blood from one to other end depends upon what? The pressure of this P1 minus P2. Okay, for example, if you have got water, if you are having a 10-story building, right? You are staying, here is a water tank. You are staying in the ground floor. Pressure 1 to pressure 2, good. So whatever water can flow, with a very good force it will flow. If you ask these people staying in the first two floors, they will say our flow is less. Water flow in the shower is less, in the taps are less, because this P1 to P2 value is not high. So this pressure difference will decide how much flow will happen. Okay, so flow to the lower limbs is much more higher compared to the upper limbs. Of course, we have got the baroreceptor to make sure that the upper limbs and the brain gets enough. Secondly, resistance. Resistance mainly is this vessel wall becoming thick. If this vessel wall becomes thick because of arteriosclerosis or atherosclerosis, if there is a thrombus over here, it does not allow the blood to go through, especially stenosis due to atherosclerosis and atherosclerotic plaque like this can happen, called as coronary artery stenosis, responsible for coronary artery ischemia, and myocardial ischemia and infarction. So these factors will decide how much blood will flow. Okay, now there is a formula which you remembered in first year called as the Poiseuille-Hagen formula, which tells the relationship between the flow. So Poiseuille-Hagen formula, essentially the flow is equal to pressure difference between the two sides. Okay, and these are constants pi by 8, and inversely proportional to viscosity. Means if the blood is thicker, flow will be less. Naturally, if you take a thicker fluid, it will move slowly, right? What conditions the blood will become thicker? Like polycythemia. Anemia, the blood will become thinner. If this becomes thin and becomes, the viscosity reduces, then what happens? Flow will increase. That is why in anemia, blood flow is high. We get functional murmurs. An anemic patient you examine, they will have murmurs, systolic murmurs on the heart, which are called as functional murmurs. But interesting thing is this. It is this R value, proportionality to the radius. Okay, I have got another one which can just show you about this. I'll come back to this R. Just remember, flow is directly proportional to the radius. If the radius is more, good flow. If the radius is less flow happens, right? And inversely proportional to the length of the tube. Length of the tube I have mentioned over here, P1 to P2, right? If this length of the tube is much more longer, right, flow will be decreased. Why? Because we're not talking about up and down. If we're talking about the body, the flow is like this. If the tube is too long, flow to go from here to here will be less, unless it is supported by gravity. If I am sitting down, I am lying down, for the blood to go from P1 to P2, if the length is too much, for example, the pressure in the aorta is much more higher compared to the tip of my finger, because the tip of my finger is very far away from this and not assisted by gravity. so the flow will be inversely proportional to the length. Okay, so these are the factors called as Poiseuille-Hagen formula. Interesting thing to remember is what is called as the Reynolds number. If you remember, whenever the blood is flowing, we get laminar blood flow. If you remember your blood pressure experiment, what we are essentially doing is you tie to the arm, you tie the blood pressure cuff. What are we doing? Blood is flowing through the arm, through the brachial artery down to your lower arm from your upper arm beautifully. This is called streamlined blood flow. Streamlined blood flow. But by applying a cuff, you are actually disrupting the vessel. The vessel is actually blocked. When you block the vessel, whatever blood comes, it comes and stuck over here. It is not able to pass. This is called as turbulent blood flow. Okay, turbulent blood flow. Now, turbulent blood flow will always produce sound. The same thing can happen when we have got a vessel with a narrowing. This is a stenotic vessel. Because of atherosclerosis, this area becomes smaller. Okay. So blood which is now able to flow is not able to flow as smoothly. So it comes and hits over here, hits over here, hits over here, sometimes goes back. All this will produce what is called as turbulent blood flow. That is why, especially when the valves of the heart become smaller, aortic stenosis, mitral stenosis, aortic regurgitation, mitral regurgitation, when the valves of the heart are becoming like this, blood flow becomes turbulent. This will produce what are called as murmurs, which will produce murmurs. But this will also produce, this turbulent blood flow will not flow smoothly. That is why in coronary artery, they can also produce stenosis, can produce turbulent blood flow and less blood supply. In valves of the heart, in the valves, when this happens in the valves of the heart, this is the valve, it is narrow because of aging. Aortic stenosis valve becomes narrow. This narrow valve will become turbulent. That is why we have got valvular heart murmurs. Okay, now this is about the blood flow. Last topic I want to tell you about systemic blood pressure. You already know about this. We define blood pressure as the pressure exerted by the moving column of blood onto the walls of the blood. Okay, two factors will determine cardiac output and peripheral vascular resistance. And if you take up the blood pressure across the vasculature, we find this. Look at this. Aorta has got a very high blood pressure, right? Immediately pumped by the left ventricle. Arteries gets lower blood pressure. Whereas you come to arterioles, capillaries, venules, they are low pressure system. The pressure keeps on falling into these areas. Okay, and especially in the veins, we have got the least amount of blood pressure. Some definitions, just recall: highest blood pressure during ventricular contraction is systolic, lowest during relaxation is diastolic. What is mean arterial pressure? Can anybody define mean arterial pressure? MAP. This is the most important pressure, mean arterial pressure. What is it? So this is different from pulse pressure. You see, pulse pressure is difference between systolic and diastolic, whereas mean arterial is calculated as diastolic plus 1/3 of pulse pressure. There is no involvement of systolic over here. Diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of pulse pressure is called as mean arterial pressure. Okay. Now, the blood pressure regulatory mechanisms, you already know, there are two ways to regulate. One is a short-term regulation by the baroreceptors and the nervous system, autonomic nervous system. And we have got a long-term regulation by the kidneys. Okay. Kidneys can do this change, especially if the patient, short-term regulation is useful in day-to-day activities like playing, your movement is changing, is sitting to standing, lying down to sitting. So this change of posture, etc., we are able to change this due to the baroreceptors. Whereas long term, a patient has got high blood pressure, right? Blood pressure is increasing with aging, etc. Kidney mechanisms will come into picture. RAS system will come into picture. Okay, this is about the nervous control. You already have heard what actually happens. Let us say, for example, we have got a low blood pressure. Okay, low blood pressure. Immediately, or here taking the example of a high blood pressure. Let me take an example of a low blood pressure somewhere. Okay, no problem. Here, what happened is medulla is a center, cardiovascular center is present. Okay, in the medulla, this center has got fibers which can come to the vessels and the heart, which is nothing but sympathetic nervous system, the autonomic nerve which can come from over here. They can bring any change to the vessels and the heart and change this heart rate as well as changes in the vasculature. Let us say there is increased blood pressure. person is having increased blood pressure, how will the body bring it down? Baroreceptors present in the carotid and the aortic bodies will immediately sense the increased pressure because they are baroreceptors, pressure sensing. Once they sense this, they will send more signals. They sense higher amount of activity, they will fire more to the afferent pathways. It goes to the medulla. In the medulla, normally there is a sympathetic system. Sympathetic nervous system is actually active. Continuously it will fire to make the heart rate slightly higher, to make the vessels vasoconstrict. This is what it is doing even without us doing anything. It is trying to vasoconstrict and maintain what is called as a normal tone of the vessel wall. Okay, it is sending impulses continuously to the alpha over here, beta over here. They are sending impulses and telling, hey heart, keep on beating. Hey vessels, keep on constricting. It is like squeezing a pipe so that the pressure increases. So what they will do is, they will maintain a normal pressure. But when the mean arterial pressure is increasing, means actually there is increase in the heart rate, there is an increase in the vasoconstrictor capacity. So they are constricting more, they are squeezing more, because of which pressure is increasing. We don't want that. So baroreceptors will go and inhibit the sympathetic nervous system. When they inhibit the sympathetic nervous system, heart rate comes down as well as the vasoconstriction comes down. We bring vasodilatation. So patient has got this kind of mean arterial pressure was high. Short term, somebody gets angry, somebody is excited, somebody is doing sports. They cannot have too high blood pressure. So the heart will actually maintain this by bringing it back to normal. The same thing can be explained over here. Look at that, the imbalance over here. We did take the example of increased heart rate, right? Increased blood pressure. We can take the example of a decreased blood pressure and do the same thing over here. This imbalance over here. Now this is increase, we can have a decrease. When there is a decrease in the blood pressure, decrease baroreceptor stimulation. Why? Less blood is flowing through this baroreceptor. Baroreceptor will sense, hey, there is some less, the pressure is less, though they fire less. When they fire less, they will send less impulses to the central nervous system. Central nervous system was actually sending vasoconstrictor substances, sympathetic nervous system. It is receiving less impulses. So, hey, the signal is less, it will stimulate more. Okay. Remember, normally it will be sending impulses. It is kept inhibited. It is kept, don't send too many impulses. Baroreceptors are like police people. They're calling and telling, hey, everything is normal on this road. Don't send too many police. So normal amount of police will keep on coming. But here, let us say, they will sometimes go and tell, hey, there is too much activity happening, too much blood pressure. Try to reduce the blood pressure. Sympathetic nervous system was inhibited. But now they are saying, hey, there is so less activity happening. Send more blood, because less blood is flowing. I am getting less excited. I want to test, and I'm seeing that less blood flow happening, increased blood flow. So by sending less impulses, it will disinhibit. Normally it was inhibited, kept in check. Now disinhibition. Disinhibition means stimulation. Stimulation of sympathetic nervous system increases cardiac output to the beta receptors on the heart, increases blood pressure mainly by constricting the vasoconstriction of the blood vessels. So this will bring back the blood pressure back to normal. It was fallen, the blood pressure here had fallen, we brought it back. The opposite chain of event happens when there was an increase in the blood pressure, too much baroreceptor firing, they will increase the baroreceptor input to this cardioinhibitory center, inhibition of sympathetic nervous system and vasomotor center, thereby decrease heart rate, decrease contractility, and vasodilatation. Vasodilatation, this will all bring the blood pressure back to normal. Okay. Lastly, I want to just tell about the system, which is the RAS system. If the short-term regulation of blood pressure is not sufficient, we get what is called as the long-term regulation, where now increased blood pressure has to be managed by the kidneys. So whenever there is an increased blood pressure, as you already know, we have got the system in the kidney, we have got baroreceptors in the kidney itself. They will detect two things: drop in the blood pressure or increase in the blood pressure, or fluid volume. Both of these actually can change renin release. If you take example of hypotension, let us say there is a patient who has got shock. In shock, as you will study in the last case, there is a much decreased blood pressure. There is a hypotension with tachycardia. Blood pressure is too much reduced. The patient lost blood. So we want to increase the blood pressure. before we trying to give him fluid or blood, the body starts to work. What does it do? It will detect this, renin will be released from the kidneys, right? Angiotensinogen, which is produced by the liver, is already there in the blood, inactive. Renin will go and convert this to angiotensin 1. Okay, angiotensinogen converted to angiotensin 1. Now angiotensin 1, now it is activated, it goes to the circulation, it is in the blood circulates, goes to the liver, especially in the capillary endothelium, pulmonary capillary endothelium. There is an enzyme called as angiotensin converting enzyme. There is also a drug called as ACE inhibitors. It will inhibit this enzyme, does not allow angiotensin 1 to convert to angiotensin 2. But here in shock, this will convert. Angiotensin ACE enzyme will release from the lung, pulmonary capillary endothelium, will convert this to angiotensin 2. And angiotensin 2 is the one which actually have got multiple effects. It can go and tell the blood vessels, directly causing vasoconstriction. So it is there in the blood, capillary, the blood vessel endothelium, it has smooth muscles. It can go and tell the smooth muscles to contract, producing vasoconstriction. It can also go, that is what it is called as renin angiotensin aldosterone axis, RAS or system. So this second A is aldosterone. Aldosterone will act again. What does aldosterone do? It will cause reabsorption of water. See, there was low blood pressure because there was a blood loss. So by reabsorbing sodium and water, you are bringing this back into the blood so that the blood circulation will improve. So by doing those two things, by quite a good time period, it can maintain the renal, it can maintain the blood supply. But again, if this blood pressure is continuing to fall because the patient continues to lose blood, there is a diarrhea, continues to lose fluid, this mechanism will fail and RAS system cannot work. At this point, we have to make sure we give enough fluid and resuscitate the patient. Okay, so this is an overview about the cardiac cases which you are going to study. We talked about the excitation contraction thing, very much useful in your arrhythmia changes. We talked about the normal blood vessels, very much useful today. Okay, and we also talked about blood pressure, useful in your cases. Valvular disease also have Circadapt. Circadapt is a software, inshallah, I will explain to you next week, where we can change the various parameters. We can make aorta become small. We can stenose the aorta. We can make aorta regurgitate and see the changes on what is called pressure volume loops, which are a very important component to understand the symptoms and clinical features coming up in the next cases. Okay, so this is all about the part 1 of cardiovascular system. Circadapt will inshallah talk about the part 2 of the cardiovascular system. Now at this point, do you have any doubts, any questions or any comments? Okay, good. So your goal is actually to go and refresh these things and discuss using the images from standard textbooks in your post discussions. Whenever you want to refresh something, starting give 15-20 minutes, even half an hour. I would not mind if you give 30 minutes to refresh, and the remaining about 60 to 70 minutes for your pathology and pharmacology things. Okay, because refreshing is very important. When you refresh properly, you can go on to this 60 to 70 minutes you can spend, or even 90 minutes you can spend